Shalom Aleichem, Mishpachim. All right. I am in my second studies from the book of Leviticus, aside from our communal Torah learning for each reading on Shabbos and during the week. I am reading also in the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, and I am in the Parsha Vayikra as well, the very first part of this book. I am in the third Aliyah, the third reading, and I am reading from Onkelos. I have other videos with Rashi on Leviticus also, so check out my videos on that. Rashi is there. All right. I also have Likutei Sichas on also on Vayikra, on Leviticus. Also, I have some other Torah on Leviticus, Breslov Torah. It's called Rabbi Nachman's Torah. I have that on Leviticus as well. So check out my videos. They're there for learning. They're there for learning. Why else would they be there? Yeah, Torah review and Torah study. It's all for learning and for growth and for growth. Yeah, spiritual and character and physical and all sorts of growth. And to build a relationship with Hashem and with people and with ourselves. All right, let us begin. We are in chapter 3, verse 1 through verse 17, and that is the third Aliyah, or the fourth Aliyah. Wait a minute. Hold on. Let's see. Yeah, chapter 3, verse 1 through 17. Let us begin. All right, let's begin reading. Torah up here, Onkelos on the bottom. Hold on, I have to shut. The train is going to come. I have to shut. Pardon my blinds. These things are cheap. I'll have to fix them, bend them back. Looks ghetto. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry for that. Nobody had to see that. It's life. Things come and things go. Of course, we should be taking care of our things, but it's what happens when you don't lift up the blinds. When you move the window open, they tend to bend, so it's my fault. All right, chapter 3, I'll finish my rant here. Chapter 3, verse 1. If his offering is a holy sacrifice, if he offers of the cattle, whether male or female, he must offer it unblemished before the Lord. Verse 2. He lays his hand on the head of his offering and slaughters it in the tent of meeting entrance. Aaron's sons, the priests, sprinkle the blood on every side of the altar. Verse 1, Onkelos, holy sacrifice. Chapter 3 discusses the sacrifice called Shalamim, the peace offering. Unlike the burnt offering discussed in chapter 1, this sacrifice was not totally consumed on the altar. Only certain specifically identified fats were burned on the altar fire, unlike the mincha offering, the meal offering, discussed in chapter 2, which could only be eaten by the priests. The shalamim was shared by the altar, the priests and the people making the sacrifice. That was shared by the altar, the priests and the people making the sacrifice. We do not know the precise meaning of the noun shalamim. The ancient, medieval, and modern Bible commentators offer different definitions. These include peace, well-being, completeness, vows, shared offering, concluding sacrifice, covenant sacrifice, a gift, reconciliation, and agreement. Rashi and Bechor Schor, based on Sifra, explain that it is called a peace offering because its meat is shared by God, the priests, and the people who offer it, and true long-lasting peace only comes when people share. The term zebach in the Bible is derived from the verb meaning to slaughter. It is used sometimes to denote sacrifices in general. However, it is also utilized to indicate the shalamim sacrifice alone. It is occasionally combined with shalamim as zevach shalamim, shalamim sacrifice. Whenever the biblical text reads zevach shalamim, or only the first or only the second word, the Torah Targums and Targum Jonathan to the prophets substitute the holy sacrifices. In Exodus chapter 32 verse 6 is an exception, since the text speaks of the golden calf, which scriptures considered unholy. Onkelos has only nichsan, sacrifice, there. The Targumists may have retained the Hebrew nouns for the other sacrifices because they felt that these nouns expressed the offering's divine purpose, while shalamim's meaning was overly broad and possibly confusing. Or, as we indicated in the introduction, the Onkelos translator may not have wanted to turn his translation into a commentary by explaining the details of all the sacrifices. Verse 2, Torah, he, the donor, not the priest. And hand, Onkelos retains hand in the singular. The biblical construction here in verses 8 and 13, ignoring the Talmudic halacha in Teruma 17b, which requires that the donor lay both hands, plural, on the head of his offering. This is called leaning. Sifra, from which the Targumist extracted his translations, also has the singular, while the Greek translation, the Septuagint, pluralizes the noun to hands. Pseudo-Jonathan retains the singular, but identifies it as the right hand. See also commentary on chapter 1, verse 4. In. The Targum adds the implied preposition of bet, meaning in, which is unnecessary in the language of the Hebrew original. I'm trying to think what leaning is in Hebrew. Is it smicha? No, smicha is not leaning. It starts with a sin, I believe. The letter sin in Hebrew, I forgot what it's called. Ends with a hey, I believe, a hey. Verse 3, or an aleph hey. Verse 3. Torah, he offers from the holy sacrifice a sacrifice before the Lord, the fat that covers the entrails and all the fat that is attached to the entrails. Verse 4, and the two kidneys and the fat that is on them, that is, on the flanks, but the diaphragm that is over the liver on the kidneys he must remove. Verse 3 and 4. Onkelos, holy sacrifice, which in this term, in this text, in this verse, it's considered shalamim. Sacrifice. In this text, in this verse, it's considered fire, as Onkelos puts it, sacrifice. And before, meaning two, and the fat, hachelev. Onkelos translates the noun as tarbe. Chazkuni insists that the Hebrew and Aramaic denote increase, which signifies something that is good and laudatory, the part of the body that makes the animal special. The chelev is the fat that surrounds the kidneys, liver, and entrails. Like blood, it is forbidden for human consumption. Ordinary fat that sticks to the animal's flesh is called shuman in Rabbinic Hebrew and may be eaten. I thought all fat belonged to Hashem. Maybe I'm wrong. Kidneys, scripture, as we noted in the past. See, for example, the introduction and the commentary on verse chapter 1, verse 14. Frequently includes the definite article hey, which is the, even when the word to which it is attached denotes the indefinite article. Our Targumist generally deletes definite articles that modern Hebrew would consider improper, and does so here and in chapter 4, verse 9. For ha-kelayot, the flanks. Sifra and the Babylonian Talmud, Brachot 40a, admit that scripture's ha-ke-salim is obscure, and scholars differ as to which fat is meant. The Saadia Gaon opted for a general indefinite statement, inner organs. Rashi translates it as flanks, and identifies it as the fat of the kidneys. Even Ezra derives the meaning from kesel, certain stars. In Isaiah chapter 13, verse 10, that flanked different sides of a constellation. Onkelos's gesisia is the Aramaic term that replaces Scripture's tzad, which is side. In Targum Jonathan to Isaiah chapter 60 verse 4 and chapter 66 verse 12, and it is the frequent Talmudic usage for side, such as the phrase le'idak gisa, to the other side. Diaphragm. The meaning of Scripture's hayo teret is also uncertain. Some ancient sources see it as the lobe of the liver. Rashi quotes our Targum and identifies it as the diaphragm. On. All of the Targums are literal here and do not change the text here or in the next verse to incorporate Sifras and Saadia Gaon's and Chazkuni and Rashi's interpretation that the verse's prepositional al means in addition to or with. That is, one must remove the diaphragm in addition to the kidneys and liver. The items mentioned in this section, as well as the broad tail of the sheep, were the sole body parts burned on the altar for all sacrifices. The sole exception is the olah, the burnt offering, which was entirely consumed on the altar. Verse 5 and 6, Torah. Aaron's sons burn this on the altar with the burnt offering that is on the wood that is on the fire, as a sacrifice that is accepted with pleasure before the Lord. If his offering for holy sacrifice before the Lord is from the flock, whether male or female, he must offer it unblemished. Verse 5. Ankelos, burnt offering. This is a daily tamid offering, chazkuni, which was always offered as the first offering of the day. Sacrifice. In this biblical context, in this specific verse, it is termed fire. And pleasure, in this verse, it is termed sweet savor, translated as sweet savor, for pleasure. And Bible, understanding it to be two. Holy sacrifice. Again, this is termed shalamim in this verse. See commentary on verse 1. Before, again, two. All right, verse 7, Torah. If he offers a sheep as his offering, he must offer it before the Lord. He lays his hand upon the head of his offering. He slaughters it before the tent of meeting. Aaron's sons sprinkle its blood on every side of the altar. Verse 8. Ankelos, hand. See commentary on verse 2. Sprinkle. Rashi, based on the Babylonian Talmud, and Zevachim 53a and 55a, explains that the shalamim, blood sprinkling, was performed with a vessel, whereas the guilt offering, blood, was sprinkled with the finger. Verse 9, Torah, he offers from the holy sacrifice, as a sacrifice before the Lord, the fat, broad tail, which is removed up to the spine, and the fat that covers the entrails, and all the other fat that is attached to the entrails. Verse 9, Ankelos, holy sacrifice. This is termed in this text shalamim. Sacrifice, this is termed by Ankelos fire. And Bible, this is termed two. The fat, broad tail. This is the Hebrew term chelbo ha-aliyah temima. Both the Hebrew chelbo and the Aramaic tarbe can be translated in two ways, either as fat or the choice part. Doesn't have the... Okay. Now I gotta turn the page. Duh. Finish verse 9. Thus the phrase could mean the fat's broad tail, as we have rendered it, or the choice part of the whole lamb, the tail, as Rashi translates it. It could also mean both. In the ancient Near East, the sheep had a heavy tail that sometimes weighed over 10 pounds and was considered a delicacy. Spine. The Hebrew term is atzeh. Even Ezra observes that this is the only mention of this word in Scripture, and therefore its meaning is lost. Rashi traces the Hebrew atzeh to eitzah, advice. He suggests that atzeh means kidneys, since in Talmudic thought, the Babylonian Talmud, Chulin 11a and elsewhere, the kidney, not the mind, was the organ of thought. However, Ankelos treats it as shazarta, skeleton or spine. And some onkelos texts lack scripture's vav, which is and. Verse 10, Torah. The two kidneys and the fats that is on them, that is on the flanks, and the diaphragm that is over the liver on the kidneys, he must remove. Verse 11, Torah. The priest burns these on the altar as food of a sacrifice before the Lord. All right, we'll move to 10 with onkelos. Kidneys. The Targumist and Pseudo-Jonathan treat the kidneys in verses 10 and 15 as if they lacked the definite article hey, the, which is the. See commentary in chapter 1, verse 14. Diaphragm. All right, see commentary in verse 4. Verse 11, onkelos, food. The Bible's Hebrew word, lechem, terminology lechem, and its Aramaic rendering literally meaning bread. Bread is a familiar figure of speech for food. What is called a synekdoche, where a part of something signifies the whole. As for example, sail to indicate ship. As Rashi explains, it is the food of the fire. Although our Targumist explains many figures of speech, he does not explain them all. For this would transform his translation into a volume that is entirely unrecognizable from the Hebrew original. Here he must have felt that there was no need to explain bread, because most people know that bread is used as a near synonym for food, sacrifice. In this verse, it is considered fire. In Bible, it is to, as in to the Lord. Verse 12, Torah. If his offering is of the goats, he must offer it before the Lord. Verse 13, he lays his hand upon its head, he slaughters it before the tent of meeting. Aaron's sons sprinkle its blood on every side of the altar. Verse 12, onkelos. Of the goat, scripture simply reads, if his offering is a goat, the Targumist adds min, meaning of or from, as well as the word b'nai, pluralizes it goat, and adds the definite article the. All of the changes enhance the clarity of the phrase. Verse 13, all right, verse 14. Torah, he makes his offering from it as a sacrifice before the Lord, the fat that covers the entrails and all the other fat that is attached to the entrails. 15, Torah, the two kidneys and the fat that is on them, that is, on the flanks, and the diaphragm that is over the liver, on the kidneys, he must remove. Verse 14, sacrifice. Again, it is termed fire in this context. In Bible, it is termed to. Verse 15, Torah. Kidneys, see commentary in verse 10. Flanks, see commentary in verse 4. Diaphragm, all right, see commentary. Verse 16, Torah, the priest burns them on the altar as food of a sacrifice that is accepted with pleasure. All fat belongs before the Lord. Isn't that what I just said? It is an eternal law throughout the generations. In all your settlements, you must not eat any fat or any blood. All right, verse 16, onkelos, food. The biblical terminology in this context, in this verse, is bread. Sacrifice, it is, in this verse, the term fire. Pleasure, and this time it's termed sweet savor in this context, in this verse. And Bible is termed in this context too. Verse 17, onkelos, it is an eternal law. The Israelites' meat eating was restricted during their desert wandering, perhaps to limit the consumption of the short supply of animals. They were only permitted to ingest meat when they offered part of it as a sacrifice. When they entered Canaan, the restriction was removed. This biblical passage also prohibited the consumption of blood and certain animal fats, both in the desert and later. The Israelites were forbidden to consume these items because they were part of the divine sacrifices, and therefore, in a broad sense, holy. And Jews should not think that they are eating what God eats. The term chukat, law, is derived from the root, the chet and the kaf, to inscribe or incise or stone on stone. The Targum captures this kind of law's more permanent aspect by using kayam, which signifies enduring. Onkelos highlights chapter 3. Many people have difficulties understanding some metaphors, a figure of speech, in which a term or phrase is used to describe something by comparing it to something else in a somewhat poetic fashion. Some people mistakenly take these images literally. For example, when Scripture repeatedly says a land flowing with milk and honey, they imagine a stream of these substances flowing over the Holy Land instead of a land that produces milk and honey, as our Targumist explains. The Torah has many metaphors because metaphors enhance the beauty of the scriptural language. These metaphors were never meant to be understood literally. For example, in Leviticus chapter 1 verse 9, fire is used for sacrifice. In chapter 17 verse 7, prostitute was meant to suggest to go astray. Our Targumist explains many, but not all of these metaphors. Since there are so many of them in the Torah, he would have had to write the translation that did not resemble the original Hebrew if he had translated all of them. Therefore, he was selective. He explained only metaphors that he thought his readers would not understand. Thus, in verse 11 of this chapter, he did not explain that bread meant food of any kind, because he felt that his readers used this metaphor in daily speech and would not be confused by it. They were also obviously familiar with the frequently quoted metaphor, man does not live by bread alone, Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 3, and understand that bread meant food. All right. And I believe that is the end of chapter 3, beginning chapter 4 tomorrow. And that was the fourth Aliyah. All right. This paint is flat paint and it scuffs easily, but I use it for my books. I use this for my books. All right. I'm in the wrong portion. I'm reading that on another day. Fourth reading. I forgot to introduce the Sefer, which I have in every book, or every video that I post with Onkelos. I read from the Sefer. Daily Wisdom. This is Daily Wisdom of the Vayikra Rebbe on the Parshiot. It's divided into separate aliyahs, which are 7 aliyahs, because in synagogue, when we read from the Torah in synagogue, I believe Mondays and Thursdays and Shabbat. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know Shabbat, and I think I know Thursdays, but I don't know the other day. I could be wrong. We read from the Torah and we make aliyahs, and the rabbi or whoever's reading from the Torah doesn't read the Torah portion all the way through in one whole glide. He reads one aliyah, takes a break, and it doesn't take a break, but there's some more liturgy, and then he goes on and reads the second all the way up into the 7th aliyah. I believe that's how it works. I know on Shabbat that's how it works. So, all right, I'll begin. The fourth reading, 4th aliyah. What I just read was Leviticus chapter 3, verse 1 through 17. All right. Someone wishing to draw close to God by praising Him can elect to bring a peace offering, so called because it promotes peace in the world. The title of this wisdom on the Parshiot is called Divine Physical Pleasure. He must bring a fire offering to God from the peace offering, the fat covering the innards and all the fat that is on the innards. Offering up the blood and fats of the peace offering on the altar elevated the consciousness of our animal soul to its source in the spiritual realm. Therefore, when we ate the meat of the peace offering, our animal soul shared the divine soul's spiritual experience rather than simply experiencing the sensual pleasure of eating meat. Similarly, whenever we engage in a physical pleasure for a holy purpose, such as eating delicacies on the Sabbath or holidays, we transform simple sensual pleasure into a godly means for spiritual growth and development. All of the Lubavitcher Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson's wisdom is it's like he's taking it from the storehouse of the Torah, the treasure storehouse of the Torah, and it's like he grabs it and he shares it, and it's amazing. I love his wisdom. It's truly wisdom, and I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope you guys enjoy the Torah readings and all the other videos I make on my channel, on this channel. So have a wonderful evening, Laila Tov, and Shavua Tov. All right, bye guys.